Hey, Motorman here. Yesterday's class, I had a rider who was not the worst ever, but he was pretty bad. And I'll go over the reasons why that was the case. But I want you to take a look at this video, watch the mistakes he makes, and about halfway through the class, his light comes on. That's what we call it when all of a sudden it gets 300% better. So pay attention. Make sure you watch to the end. I'm going to focus on this rider. He's on a brand new to him and also a new Indian Challenger. And as you can see, this is probably his 10th time through the exercise, still having serious problems. He looks straight, the motorcycle goes straight. That was one of the problems, not turning his head and eyes. And of course, I'm constantly telling them they need to do that. But it's one of the more difficult things that people find is turning your head and eyes and looking where you want to go rather than where you don't want to go. And here he's just plowing through the cones, dragging one of the cones along. And I get riders like this occasionally who really have a total lack of skill, but they're at the class. That means they want to get better, and I want to help them get better. You could never tell, really. Sometimes get riders this bad who throughout the class never get any better, and generally those riders will quit. Now here we move on to the second exercise, and this is my assistant Steve. He's demonstrating the exercise, and we do this at least 2 or 3 times with a motorcycle, and then I do it on the little electric cart that I have so that I could stop at certain points and tell the rider, now notice which way I'm facing. Now's the time to turn and look at the green tip cone, etc. So this rider, he goes through the exercise, and I knew he was going to have some problems with it because a lot of times riders aren't sure where they need to go because they're not seeing the exercise from above like you are here. But he's not sure where to go. He's not really turning his head and eyes. He's not dragging that rear brake as he should be. You see his brake lights occasionally, like right there, will flash on. But you should have light, steady pressure on that rear brake. It really helps when you're learning the techniques. When you get better and better, of course, you don't need the rear brake. You should be able to do all these exercises with just clutch and throttle. So here I'm having him follow me through the course because I felt he didn't know where to go. So I say, follow me on this cart, and I could, because I'm on the electric cart rather than the motorcycle, I could talk to him. I could yell back at him and say, constantly remind him to look at me because wherever I'm at, that's where he needs to be a split second later. I did that 2 or 3 times. It helped a little bit, but not a lot. He was still getting lost in the exercise, still not turning his head and eyes, occasionally pulling in the clutch. And of course, when you pull in the clutch and you're going too slow, this is what happens. The motorcycle tips over. He had at least 6 or 7 tip overs. The good thing is the Indian Challenger is very well protected. It lands right on the crash bars and no damage to the motorcycle. You might get some scratches on the crash bars, but that's what they're there for. So now we're into the intersection. And again, he appears to be not knowing where to go, even though there's arrows on the ground pointing to where you need to go. And it's just a series of U-turns and quick transitions from left to right. Again, he pulls in the clutch, down goes the motorcycle. The good thing about this rider, though, is I could tell very quickly that he had determination. He wanted to learn to do this, and there was no quitting this guy. And eventually, his light does come on. He's far from perfect, but he gets the idea. He starts dragging the rear brake. He starts turning his head and eyes, and he makes it through the exercise. I think he did it 4 or 5 times in a row perfectly. Now, I always say one time is dumb luck, but do it twice in a row, and that's skill. He did it 4 or 5 times in a row, and I was very happy with that, and I explained to him that he needs to practice on his own now and then come back to the class in a month or so. That will help him tremendously. As you can see here, he doesn't have a fear of leaning the motorcycle. He's leaning it just fine. In fact, even when he didn't, before his light came on, he was leaning the bike. He just wasn't turning his head and eyes and really not using that rear brake hardly at all. Once again, we see him here. He gets into the turn, gets all the way to the green cone, turns his head and eyes. He's dragging the brake. He makes it through. Does the same thing again, right to that green. That green tip cone is the pivot point. That's the main focus. That's the place you need to look. And really ignore all the other cones. You never look at the end of the leg or the opposite side of the leg, because if you do, that's where you're going to go. The hands follow the eyes. So as you can see, major improvement here. He's far from perfect. I don't expect perfection, but he's got the idea. His light came on. He knows what to do. Now if he practices on his own and then comes back, say a month from now, he'll be whipping through these exercises like he'd been doing it all his life. And that should be the goal. to get to where you know exactly what the techniques are, how to use those techniques, and then you apply them every time you get on your motorcycle. Now, on the Indian Challenger, I wasn't sure of its turning radius. I thought it was pretty wide, so I went over to the parking lot right next door, and they have the 18-foot parking spaces. Well, they're 9 foot, but 2 of them is 18 feet. So the best way to figure out a motorcycle's turning radius is turn it full lock and duck walk it through a U-turn like this with the bike straight up. If it makes it through in less than 18 feet, you know that if you lean the bike, you could probably do 16 feet or 16 and a half feet. But as you can see here, I'm at full lock, and it's taking more than 2 parking spaces. I'm going to estimate this at probably 21 feet, somewhere around there.
More than
so
a foot.
at full lock and full lean, you might get 18 feet out of this bike. I didn't want to chance it. It's not my motorcycle. Otherwise, I would have tried leaning it over to its limits. But if you ride an Indian Challenger, you should know that it's not going to be as nimble as, say, a full-size Harley-Davidson. So if you can get your bike down at 22-foot U-turns, you're doing really good on Indian Challenger. Thanks for watching.